This is Halloween, and if you love haunted history and cemetery walkthroughs as much as I do, you may want to subscribe because I'm going to be taking you somewhere new every week. For today's video, I'm actually quite Christmassy again, but I just can't help myself. I love Christmas, and I love Halloween. I'm literally Jack Skellington, so that's why I've got my Jack Skellington stuff on, so I love both holidays a whole lot. I don't typically mix the two. Jesus has his own day. Halloween, is all year round, so that's kind of how I do it. But anyway, this will be another kind of Christmassy episode. Now, if you don't know a whole lot about the Grand Hotel Floridan, it was established in 1926, and it's located downtown Tampa on Florida between Cass and Tyler Streets. The beautiful hotel in 1926 was designed by a prominent architect firm, G.A. Miller and Francis Kennard. At the time, the hotel boasted 316 rooms, all with their own bath, and cost $1.9 million to build. The beautiful hotel officially opened its doors in 1927. And at that time, it was one of the most luxurious hotels in Tampa. Besides the Tampa Bay Hotel, it was also the tallest building in downtown Tampa at that time, at a whopping 19 stories high. That is until 1960, and then finally other buildings came in and there were taller buildings. The Floridan was actually where all the rich and famous people would stay when they came to visit Tampa. Charlton Heston, for example, Jimmy Stewart, boxer Jack Dempsey, and in 1955, an up-and-coming Elvis Presley stayed there as well. Unfortunately, by the 1960s, the Floridan lost some of its appeal. Newer hotels were being built with more accommodations than the old Floridan had to offer, and people would seek other options because being right in the middle of the city, parking was a bit of a hassle. The 316 rooms were very small, and there were better options available at the time. So they started going through a bit of a decline business-wise, and just not as many people were staying at the Floridan anymore, which was very sad. As the surrounding areas grew here in Tampa, businesses downtown around the Floridan, which once brought people into the downtown area, had closed down. So not only was it just an old-fashioned hotel at this point, there wasn't a lot to do in the area, so people just were drawn to these other locations. Business died out at the Floridan. Business had died out significantly at the Floridan during this time, and the once luxurious building became run down and desolate. Closing its doors in 1966, it then became a home for long-term renters, so more of an apartment complex. At the time, the building still had 316 rooms, and these, if you can imagine, it was kind of like a little efficiency apartment, but half the size maybe of an efficiency, and they had put in little kitchenettes in each room to accommodate more of an apartment style atmosphere. So it was that for a while. It was an apartment complex of sorts for some time, and by the 1980s, being in a constant state of disrepair, unfortunately, it became nothing more than a home for transients. So transients would sleep in there. Actually, the couple days of the year where it gets cold in Florida, social workers would actually pay for rooms to house the homeless. It got pretty rough and tumble around there. It was very sad what it had become, and eventually the owners of the building didn't want to keep the building up to code, so it started getting even more run down and desolate in there. Transients would rent rooms by the week or by the month, and then rapidly conditions just started to get worse and worse. In 1985, due to the owners not wanting to keep the building up to code, the Floridan actually closed its doors for good. And it was closed for over 20 years and remained completely vacant. It is said that not even homeless wanted to get in there for shelter because it was just that bad. The roof had caved in, and vultures were making a home there on the rooftop, and it just was in really poor shape. Everyone assumed that the structure was too far gone to be repaired. That is until 2005, when a wonderful man named Antonios Markopoulos, I don't know how to really pronounce it. He's Greek, and he was a real estate investor and hotelier, however you say that, and he took an interest in the building. So in 2005, he purchased the building for $6 million, which sounds like a steal to buy a historic building, you know, but it was in really poor shape, like really poor shape. To this day, he's spent over $20 million just getting it back to its original integrity. And the hotel remains one of the most beautiful and historic places in the city of Tampa, in my opinion. Now, today it only has 195 rooms. So the rooms are larger, and there are also 3 penthouse suites, 15 junior executive suites, and an additional 12,000 feet of just meeting space. So it's quite extravagant and beautiful. And if you are in Tampa and you want to go check something out that's really cool, their Sapphire room actually was closed during our stay. Unfortunately, they're renovating it. So it was completely gutted and closed during our stay, which kind of sucks because I wanted to get in there and do a little investigating. But it's a beautiful hotel, and I would recommend, you know, staying there. It's reasonably priced. You know, you would think that something like that would be super expensive. It is not. I've watched some other videos of people going and doing investigations in there, and it's funny because they're like, "Ooh, it's creepy. It's a creepy place." It's not creepy at all, unless I'm just comfortable in creepy places. That's a possibility. I go to a lot of creepy places, but I don't feel creeped out. I feel very much at peace in most of these places. So it's a cool hotel. What was interesting to me is in our particular room, you could just feel the floors worn down. I don't know, from, you know, maybe from foot traffic from back in the day. It didn't seem to be level. So there's kind of lumpy flooring in there. I don't recall that being a thing the last time I went there. I have stayed there twice, and I don't remember that from the last time I was there. But the floors downstairs too are marble. You'll see some of that as you're checking in, that the marble in the floor from just people checking in for so many years has been worn down. It's really cool. It's an interesting place. Check it out. And they do have some haunts. The Sapphire room is one of the most haunted locations in the hotel. And, you know, it being such an old building, of course, it's had its fair share of haunts. So during World War II, the GIs would hang out in this Sapphire room of the Grand Hotel. And it was a place to go and just relieve the pressure of being in the armed forces, and everybody would go there to hang out. It was one of the only places that was really cool like that in town. So a lot of people ended up there, and even through the 1940s and stuff, when it became like a lot of gangsters, Charlie Wall, who's like the original gangster of Tampa, would hang out there. During this time, World War II, GIs would hang out there and take a load off and just have a great time. They actually called it the Surefire Room. And the Surefire Room basically meant that they were sure to get a gal in that room. Women would hang out, a bunch of men in uniform. Of course, you're gonna have women around. And the bartender, Gus, even came up with his own beverage, and it was called the Between the Sheets Martini. And he was said to have created this drink so that if you could get a girl to actually drink 2 of these beverages, you could surely get her between the sheets. GIs would go there hoping to score, and they would buy these drinks for these ladies and hopefully get lucky. But it is said that some patrons of the Sapphire Room still linger. People have reported hearing voices and laughter when no one's in there. So the Sapphire Room will be empty. Someone will go in there and they hear like these disembodied voices of laughter and carrying on just like it was back in the day. But one ghost story in particular has to do with a Colonel Clarence Tinker. Now, this colonel was an Osage Native American, and he was eventually promoted to Major General, and the first Native American to receive such an honor in any branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. On December 7th, 1941, Colonel Tinker was having a drink, enjoying himself in the Sapphire Room, when suddenly he was disrupted by friends of his from the base who came to alert him to the fact that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. And getting this news, immediately he was called to action. And unfortunately, during the Battle of Midway, Tinker's aircraft malfunctioned, and he, along with all of his crew that was aboard that plane with him, perished in a plane crash. And neither his aircraft or any of his men were ever found, or himself. So he is said to be still hanging out at the Sapphire Room. People have reported a man sitting at a table all by himself, dark hair, he's a man in uniform, and he has a drink. Some people claim that it is a between the sheets martini, but I guess we'll never know. But he's sitting there, sorrowfully looking into his beverage, as if to kind of feel his impending doom. So people have claimed to see this man. People also say that if they try to approach him, that he vanishes into thin air. So it's pretty interesting. It's a really cool story. Now, another cool story I'll tell you that really kind of gave me goosebumps is a story about a woman that was living in the Floridan Hotel at the time when it was apartment complexes. And this story was actually recounted by her daughter for a book or something that was being written. And since her daughter has also passed away. But she said that her mother was renting an apartment there, and she had an experience. When her mother was living there, she one morning woke up, she was going to make her breakfast. She decided she wanted to listen to the radio while she was making breakfast. Now, she claimed that her mother was still really old-fashioned, and she had one of these old radios with the knobs that turn, and no batteries in it. It had to be plugged in to work. So as she started making her breakfast, she had plugged her radio in, and she went ahead and turned it on. Well, it was on an Elvis song. She thought, that's great, I love Elvis. So she starts listening to her little Elvis jam while she's making breakfast. Once the song was over, though, she noticed that the radio dial started turning itself. It had tuned into another station that was also playing an Elvis song. She thought, that's odd, I didn't even touch it. So she kind of got a little freaked out and turned the radio off. And while she sat there and looked at her radio, she saw it turn itself back on. Now, she didn't touch it or anything. And what do you know? Another Elvis song. It was playing Heartbreak Hotel. This freaked her out. She turned it off, left her apartment, and took the elevator down to the lobby. As she gets to the lobby, she runs out, and a friend runs to greet her. And that friend said, "Did you hear the news? Did you hear the news?" She said, "No." And her friend said, "Elvis died today." Can you believe it? It gives me goosebumps to even think about it. But Elvis had died that day, and her radio kept playing these Elvis songs, and that's pretty wild. I have no doubt in my mind that there are plenty of stories. If you can find somebody that's been around long enough to have been there in its heyday, that would be an interesting conversation. I just wanted to let you know that I get my information from books, for the most part. Sometimes online, but usually if it's a haunted place or something that I'm visiting, I get my information from books. This one's really great. It's called Haunted Tampa, Spirits of the Bay, and it's by Deborah Freedom, and it's got stories of all kinds of things. You'll notice on the front, I actually did a video on this place here, the Jackson Rooming House, my Valentine video where I visited the Union Italiana Cemetery. I also told you about the Jackson Rooming House. So that was another really cool place that a lot of celebrities stayed at the time. It was a black boarding house during the time when there was segregation and stuff. So today it's in really poor shape, but if you want to check that out, you can catch my video on the La Union Italiana Cemetery, which is also a really beautiful cemetery if you want to check that out. One of the oldest in Tampa. Since this is my Christmas timey video, I just wanted to share something with you that I've been doing for a few years. This is not to toot my own horn or anything like that. Typically when you do charitable things, you don't tell the whole wide world about it. That's the whole idea of charity, is to do the right thing when no one's looking, basically. But I just wanted to share with you, maybe give you this idea so that maybe you might want to do it. Years ago when I was working for a food broker here in Tampa, one of my coworkers had told me about something that she does during the holidays. Now this doesn't have to be done during the holidays. You can do it any time of year, but it was something called blessing bags. She's like, you ever heard of blessing bags? And I'm like, no, what is that? It's basically a bunch of stuff you put together and just make a little bag. I usually just use the Ziploc bags because they're pretty versatile and can be used for other things too. But I get the one with the nice zipper top. I usually do about 6 or 8 of these, and I just give them out to the homeless during the holidays. So it has $1 in it, and for this one, I usually kind of have a theme. But when me and my husband travel, they give you the little shampoos and conditioners and lotions and stuff. I save all of those for my blessing bags at the end of the year. And this year I kind of themed it wellness. I packed things in it like emergency tea bags. I have some cough drops in here, hand sanitizer, since we've been having the COVID stuff and, the flu and stuff going around. So I kind of themed it as such. I also have a kind bar, or I usually put a cereal bar or some kind of treat in there. What else do I have in here? Oh, like tissues, like the little packs of tissues. I usually always put a toothbrush and the little toothpaste in there. But it's just something nice you can do for the homeless. I think oftentimes we take everything for granted, that we have a roof over our head and a bed to sleep in. And there are people out there that don't have that. So it's just a nice little gesture to do if you wanted to do something like that. What I usually do is when I buy a pack of toothbrushes, I'll make that many bags. So if you get a pack of 6 or 8 toothbrushes, that's how many bags I'm going to make. And a lot of these things are just things that I had at home, the tea bags and stuff, but they can go to any 7-Eleven and get a hot cup of water and at least have something that's flavored that they can drink on a cold day. So just something that I do and I wanted to share with you. And I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. And remember that Jesus is the reason for the season. That does it for today's episode. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And Merry Christmas. I'll see you next time.